Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Zoom discussion this evening. Tonight, I'm very excited to be joined by Basil Jones and Adrian Kohler from Handspring Puppet Company. Welcome, Basil and Adrian. I don't think that Handspring needs much of an introduction. They are, without doubt, South Africa's preeminent puppet company. They were founded in 1981 and have grown under the leadership and artistic direction of Adrian Kohler and executive producer Basil Jones over 40 years. But what many of you may not know is that Adrian and Basil have also been collecting art for over 3 decades. And Aspire has a wonderful selection of works from their collection on auction next week on the 30th of November. So this evening, we're going to be looking at the works in the collection. But first, Adrian and Basil, can you talk a little bit about when you started collecting and what sort of motivated your initial acquisitions?
Well, I guess, hi Sarah, and it's lovely to be talking to you. I guess we went to art school. We did fine arts degrees, majoring in sculpture. So we were obviously very interested in art. And we ended up in Botswana after a few years of being in South Africa. And I started seeing African art there that I hadn't seen before. And there was a piece that I really loved, a Senufo head. And I thought, I've got to have that. And so that was the first piece that I bought, probably how long out of art school? 1978.
We graduated in 74.
We graduated in 74. So 4 years out of art school, I bought my first piece, and this is it. It's now quite ancient in itself. It's been out in the weather. It's a Senufo piece. And it would have been worn on someone's head. And I don't think it was made for performance. I think it's probably made for sale.
As a curio. It was in a curio shop in Francistown in northern England. So it's not a genuine masterpiece, but of course we didn't know that at the time.
Part of how you learn, I think, is by making mistakes, and so it was. Our collection was founded on a mistake, but it's become quite beautiful now, seeing it's been outside for 40 years.
Okay, thank you. I think that one of the most interesting things about your collection is that many of the artworks in your collection are actually from people that you know.
Sorry,
well.
no, I'm not. I didn't book it on my.
Oh, sorry, I don't know what happened there.
Thank you. Next time, please knock on the door. Thank you.
All right. Move on. I know that many of your works are from people you knew and people you've actually worked with professionally. And I know you've had a really long and fruitful relationship with William Kentridge. And this first lot is a really exciting lot, Ubu Tells the Truth. It's a set of 8 etchings. And I quite often see these etchings being sold individually, but this is actually the complete set of 8 being sold together, which is really fantastic. But you actually worked with Kentridge on the production Ubu and the Truth Commission, which was hugely successful. Can you tell us a little bit about the production and the puppets, and also about how the live show relates to these etchings?
Yeah, William was very interested in Jerry and the Ubu idea, and he was collaborating with and with maybe you should tell some of the people to mute their screen. We're getting interference from.
Yeah, James, I think you need to mute. Sorry.
Yeah. In the process of developing the project, we were the Truth and Reconciliation Commission hearings were starting to happen in South Africa. We wanted to do a piece about waiting for restitution, and when the commission started operating, it seemed the ideal opportunity, but we didn't really know how to start. William was wanting to do a Ubu piece with Robin Orlin, and we were wanting to do the waiting piece, and all of these threads came together in a piece that Jane Taylor eventually wrote, Ubu and the Truth Commission, and it involved, quite a number of the imagery that William had been developing in the various processes. The Ubu series of etchings came before the theatre piece.
So Ubu, Kentridge kind of casts himself as Ubu. It's a sort of a self-portrait, I think. And I think because he sees maybe the selfish person that Ubu is as something that we all have in ourselves. In the play, David Minnaar plays Ubu, and the white outline that you see in the prints becomes a fat suit that is Ubu's conscience that visits David Minnaar periodically through the show. So there you can see Minnaar's body with the fat suit behind him. And that comes from Jarry's original sketch, and the spiral or the vortex is also a quote from Jarry. The show premiered in Weimar in June 1997 and was hugely successful. It went for about 20 years, nearly 20 years, went to 50 cities around the world, in Paris, London, Rome, New York, Johannesburg, Prague, Naples, Vancouver, Sao Paulo, Bogota, not Cape Town, unfortunately. But it's been very central to all of our work, and we really love we love everything about it.
Great. And the next work is the other Kentridge print. This work, Rand Minds, is from 1999. And what attracted you to this particular work? I don't think it was related to a production, but just an aesthetic choice, perhaps.
No, it is related to a production. Our first collaboration with William was Voices on the Highveld, and in the animated, it was an experiment really to see whether the puppets could be the foreground humans to the Kentridge landscapes that he was making, that were featuring a lot in his short animated films, because the human beings tended to take a huge amount of drawing and rubbing out to achieve. I thought maybe the roughly carved puppets could do that job for the play, and that the backgrounds could be done in the normal style that he was using. So the mine dumps and the industrial detritus of the mining in the history of Johannesburg were very much part of the background that accompanied the live show of Wojciech on the Highveld.
I think the fact that this print is made onto actual ledger paper makes eloquent reference to the monetization of land around Johannesburg.
And we lived in Kensington with the Langemans Kop behind our house, and from the top of the Kop you could look over and see some of the landscapes with mine dumps. So it was very much like the neighborhood.
Okay, great. So again, really reflective of not only your work but also your environment.
Yeah.
Let's move back onto the Simon Stone. This is the first painting that we have in this collection by Simon Stone, SNCP, or Spontaneous Non-Conceptual Painting. And Simon Stone is also someone that you've had a long relationship with. When did you first meet Simon Stone?
Well, we were at art school together. We were a year ahead of him and Marlene Dumas, 1 year behind us. So we knew him right from the start. We admired his work as we admired Marlene's work, actually, right from the beginning. He arrived at art school already as a consummate painter. He and his wife Giovanna became firm friends of ours. And when they moved to Johannesburg and we were touring with Handspring children's shows in a truck around the country, we would park our truck outside their house in Fox Street, Johannesburg, and stay with them during the time that we were doing schools in Johannesburg. So we got to know him very well, and we saw how very hard he worked and how much he loved looking at other people's work, particularly in relation to what they knew about color. He's a great colorist.
He is.
Yeah.
He is. I know that Kentridge has said that Stone is one of South Africa's best painters. So I was wondering, is that a statement you agree with? And what about this particular painting was actually attractive to you? What made you love this particular work?
Simon at art school, we could see, was always driven. We were all at art school in a period of international minimalism, which was completely opposed in a way to the figurative. And Simon balked again and again, knocked heads with the lecturers, because his work was figurative, and he was very good at painting, representational work. But he was, he doesn't talk very much about his work.
No.
It's become, at times it's very enigmatic. Sometimes he juxtaposes sort of things which could only really appear in dreams. And this particular painting has constantly had a mystery about it. It's hard to know what it means. That vase and that landscape, there are similar resonances in color. There is a lovely interplay between the sort of golds and the opposite blues. So he's working with that kind of contrast. There are these sort of semi-precious pastel colored jewels somewhere in the middle.
They sort of reference his sinkers that he loves to paint, and stones.
Yes.
And those looped shapes in the upper part always reminded me of heartbeats. So I saw them as heartbeats inside of the torso. There's a sort of a yellow torso shape around there. But I think what's special about Simon is that every time you come to the work, you can bring something new, or you can see something new. It's the very fact that they are elusive in terms of their meaning makes them fecund for you coming to the work often when it's in your home. And this is a very quiet work. The blues, the horizontality of the landscape, it has a silence. And so it was something that we had in our bedroom, and we loved that silence. And I think, the silence and the enigma, the Sphinx is and his silence, really, he hates to talk about his work or interpret his own work. He really leaves it up to you. And that's something that was a problem in a way with little Amal, the giant little girl puppet that we've recently had walking across Europe. She couldn't speak, or she didn't speak. It was impossible for a very large giant to be have a child's voice. How would you produce that child's voice? Where would it come from? There were several different puppeteers manipulating, and inside that puppet, depending on the day and the job that she had to do on that day. So she was silent. She is silent. And in the beginning, it seemed like, how could she? Greta Thunberg, for instance, is an activist who is anything but silent, and that's her articulateness is very important. But little Amal's silence became a very powerful thing, and one of her great assets, I think, the fact that she says nothing and you have to project meaning onto her from yourself. And that's, in a way, something that that Simon does too.
Simon is always, every now and then, just disappearing out of Cape Town and parking off in the Karoo somewhere. And this is one of those paintings where he must.
Yeah, I think his works have got a wonderful kind of silence about them. And the fact that Simon doesn't talk too much about his works offers such a fantastic opportunity to have that silence and to think about his works, which is quite in contrast with the next work that we have here, which is a work by Billy Monk. And Anna, there we go, we can move on to that work. And Billy Monk, I know, is someone who you also knew personally, but not necessarily as a photographer. Can you tell us a little bit about how you met Billy Monk?
My first job outside, when I left art school, was to join the Space Theatre, which was started by Ethel Fugard, Yvonne Bryceland, and Brian Asprey in Bayton and Bloom, between Bayton and Bloom Street in just off Long Street in Cape Town. And started in 1972, and in 1975 I got a job there. And I needed a pair of sandals, and Billy Monk had a small little leather shop underneath the theatre where he was making belts and sandals. And he was well known for that. He was well known for being quite a bolshy kind of guy. And I went there and he traced around my feet and he said, come back at the end of the week and you can take delivery of your new sandals. So I was thrilled. I thought, handmade to measure. And when I went there at the end of the week, he said, oh no, I just sold them to someone else. And so he said, but these ones look like they'll fit you. So I got somebody else's shoes that he must have measured for somebody else. And I never had my made to measure sandals, but these ones were fine. So that was my knowledge of Billy Monk. He was already about a decade older than the photographs in this collection.
He was a photographer and a shoemaker as well. Yeah. But if I'm looking at this work, I mean, this is a really, really iconic work by Monk. Visually, it's just really, really strong. And also the work that appears on the cover of his monograph. So what about this work attracted you to the work? I mean, just in terms of composition and subject.
Well, it's the catacombs, and the tables there are in the shape of coffins. So that's the one that she's standing behind. Her brandy bottle act is in full swing, and the mermaid on the painting on the wall behind her is almost an extension of her hairdo and wig. But clearly, it's a performance that is not unique to that particular night, judging by the expression of the man on the left. He's seen it all before. Yeah. and that little, the jaunty straw in the Coke bottle on top of the coffin is just a nice little accent down in the bottom right-hand corner. It's this sort of triangular composition between the drag queen, the Coke bottle, and the bored man on top of the coffin is really amazing.
Yeah, it's a really strong composition.
I want to read a little comment from Ashraf Jamal on Monk. He said, Monk was able to capture the lives of people redeemed from apartheid scrutiny, for in these hidden worlds, no one cared about status, caste, sexual preference. One senses too that Monk's subjects knew and trusted him, for with him they could be themselves. If I consider Monk as one of South Africa's greatest photographers, it has everything to do with his humanity. He was no voyeur, no connoisseur, no brittle collector of others' lives. Monk's pictures evoke the singularity of the moment, the humanity of his men and women, the pleasure of lives freed, if only for a moment, from the burden of history. His image repertoire speaks to a greater vision regarding what we truly are and what we may become. I think that's really well expressed of what it was all about. And these are very special pictures. And I just adored the humor of the Limousin brandy maracas.
Yeah, they are great, and it's a really great image. I think though, yes, this is the next photographic work that we have in the selection, and it's a work by Zanele Moholi. And this image of Tumin Kopani, it's actually part of Moholi's Faces and Phases series. And the artist, she embarked on this project in 2006 and has since then created over 500 black and white portraits of her community. But this image is particularly striking, and I know to you, one of the strongest in the series. What about this particular subject and composition makes it such a visually kind of strong work to you?
Well, you know, when I think I was at the Stevenson Gallery, I looked through many of these 500 works. I looked and looked, and one of the things that I say to young collectors is look and look and look and look and look. You really have to stare at a work when you are thinking about whether it's right for you or not. So I looked at many of them, and her face I just found so enigmatic. It's strong without being assertive. It has a vulnerability, that naked shoulder, and the dress is sort of makes her quite vulnerable. But then look at the shaved head. That's quite sassy and not about vulnerability. And then, you know, Zanele chooses her backgrounds very carefully. And here you've got a background that could be white marble, but it also is possibly just a piece of foam rubber. But through her head, through her brow, goes a horizontal line in the background, which seems to suggest her thoughts. And then the other lines all converge on her, behind her, so on her face. So it's a beautifully constructed work, and I think really one of the really best of hers, of that series.
It is a really beautiful work, and I think when you initially look at it, you don't realize how carefully constructed that composition is and how considered every element of it is. But when you start looking into the background, you start seeing, you know, that Moholi has really put together that composition so perfectly, which really makes it such a striking and such a strong work, and a really, really beautiful image. This work is another beautiful photograph, though, and this one is by Bonili Bam, and was taken on a trip to Coffee Bay when he was doing a story on initiation rites. And I know that Bam has said that after he took this particular photograph, a lot of the initiates came to him and wanted their photographs taken. But it was actually this image that motivated him to become a documentary photographer. And again, it's just such a striking photograph, and you both seem to have such a wonderful capacity to sort of hone in on an artist's work and select their strongest images. So again, I mean, what drew you to this particular work?
Well, first of all, it's the sensuousness of his body, and the fact that it looks like carved out of white marble. It references so many sculptures in Western art, but it's also beautiful because it's lying against this brutish stone, kind of cubist stone. So there's a wonderful contrast there, and then compositionally, there's jet black behind. You know, it's the stone that he's lying on has a brighter light quality than the stone behind him, which is like a cave. But that stone just shows the lines of the body so beautifully. But then the clincher for me is the poetry of the little stalk, the plant that he's stuck, I presume, into the the portable radio as an aerial. It just feels like he's listening to the ancestors. He's got his eyes closed, and it's the music of the ancestors coming through that plant. So for me, it's got a humor and a beauty and a compositional perfection that really drew me towards it.
Yeah, another really, really strong work in terms of composition and subject. And I think we're moving on now to the first, another painting. And these two works are by Clive van den Berg, and they're both part of his Frontier erotic series. And for this series, Van den Berg visited frontier battle sites, and these paintings are sort of his response to those sites. So they offer a kind of alternative truth to those sites in a sense. And I know, Basil, you told me recently about how you and Adrian went to quite considerable lengths to avoid military service. And I was wondering kind of what meaning these works that are interrogating military victory kind of hold for you, if any, or what it is that actually interests you about the works.
Well, we were caught in the trap. We didn't avoid military service, but we did eventually escape the latter parts of it. I think these are Clive talking about almost the erotics of colonial power.
Okay.
You know, there are these two quite dominant European figures, Caucasian figures, standing in the African landscape, which looks pretty devastated, like from war. There's obviously sexual excitement in the two men. And in the one on the right, there is perhaps a victim of a sexual encounter, which seems to be talking about the power that the colonial force has over both the landscape and the people in it. So it's a meditation on the politics of colonial power, I think, and the erotics of male sexuality.
And I kind of, relate to it also because in trying to get out of the army, we both told the army that we were queer, and the response by the commandant of Adrian's camp on the border of South Africa and
of Namibia and Angola. When
he told his commandant that he was gay, the commandant said, come on, Kohler, we've come up here to fight, not to fuck. I've got sexual problems of my own. And for me, when I told them that I was queer, they put me straight into hospital in pajamas in the military camp in Wynberg. And I eventually got boarded out of the army because of that, but it's a long story. But so queerness and army to us they were close. They were highly problematic, and so
these are both two quite difficult pieces.
Yes.
The man hiding under a transparent mosquito net, in a barren landscape, touching his nipple in a masturbatory fashion, is the mosquito net doesn't hide who he is.
Yeah, and they're kind of images, brave images, I think, for Clive to put into the public domain. And we've been involved in queer politics, I guess, since the beginning. We made a giant puppet of an egret, a cattle egret, for the first gay march in South Africa, in Johannesburg. When was that? 1990.
1990.
So it's something that's curious for us, and that we are, what is the status of the person who's kneeling in the bottom right? Is he a victim, or is he not a victim? And again, it's part of the enigma of the work. I love the tiny sliver of sky in that work as well.
Yeah, I think these are definitely very brave works and very complex works, and really interesting also because in terms of your collection, they're talking about issues that have a history and that are quite kind of complex and important to you, which adds an extra kind of layer of depth to them. But I think, Anna, maybe you could move on to the next. There we go. This work has an entirely different kind of focus from what I understand, though, and it's a lovely Dumili Feni work. And I know that really another kind of fantastic element of your collection is that many of the artworks you've had, in addition to being from people you've known or about kind of important issues, are actually images that have influenced your own creative output. And from what I understand, this work has been an inspiration for several of your puppets. Can you tell me a little bit about what elements drew you to this work and where you've used it as a visual reference?
Well, Dumili is a sculptor as well as two-dimensional artist, as you know, and the way he handles volume, particularly in the heads of his sculptures, are you know, there's an abstract quality to them, and a kind of a stylized representation of features, but the volume, the kind of the ball of the head in this drawing, it suggests a very massive, solid head, and the features fit in so beautifully on it. So, I mean, I used to look at it and hope that I could try and do something with it when I was carving puppets. Here's one that it is the head of a miner from the remake of Wojciech on the Highveld.
Can you see that?
Yes. Or maybe you can go even a little bit closer if you can.
Yeah.
Up a little bit. There we go.
This character was a miner who was the lover of Wojciech's wife in the play, and you know, I hope to get some of that solidity that Dumili has in the head, but I didn't quite get it.
Yeah.
And you know, a scraper that he drew on, a scrap of cardboard, and we first about Dumili William, because William had been drawing at the Art Foundation in Johannesburg, and he talked about Dumili in the other room, who just was constantly working non-stop all the time, quite a silent, brooding presence in the Johannesburg Art Foundation. And we only got to know of his broader spectrum of work when it started all to come back to South Africa.
And I think the next work, the two bulls or the two cows, is also something that surprised us when we first saw it, because it's kind of it's showing an act that's normally brutal, but in this case they almost seem to be asleep. There's a gentleness and a softness about this image that is very original, and I love it for that.
Yeah, it's a beautiful image. I know what sort of strikes me a bit about the image is that it's got this really wonderful kind of movement to it. And when I was looking at it in your collection, I was wondering, in relation to your puppets, if that type of movement is something that you've drawn on in some of your works, and I know you've especially maybe of animals, or was it not really?
I think that the way the lines and that there's almost a see-through quality to the two figures, to the two animals here. You know, a lot of the puppets that we make are see-through from a purely practical point of view, because if you're operating a horse from inside in the context of a play, you've got to be able to see out and see the other characters that you're working with on the stage. But here he's using the see-through quality of the drawing to talk about a kind of physical, an intense physical intimacy between these two animals.
I know this next work that we have here is one that I really love. I think it's a fantastic work. It's called Skeleton by Sioka, and it's over a meter high, and from what I know, used to actually occupy quite an important place in your home. You can see it here actually holding up the bookcase in your home, although not literally, I do know. But this is something that you purchased quite early in Handspring's existence. What role did this sculpture play in the development of your style?
We went on a trip up to Venda and we met Jackson Hlongwane, and we met some of the other Venda carvers, the then Venda carvers, and I think this piece, the kind of vigorous nature that it's carved, obviously from an upside down tree, a fork in the tree with arms added. It's got a puppet-like quality to its arms attached to the shoulders, which would have been the trunk of this particular branch, and then the playful nature of the abstraction of the skeleton.
Yeah, I think it really surprised me. It felt very modern when I encountered it, and yet also very strong in its the carving is so assured. He was already, Sioka was already quite far into his career by this time, and you can see that this is done by someone who really understands what he's about, and it's again also a sense of humor. The fact that the arms can be up or down or anywhere. It's funny and extraordinarily well designed,
and I see you've put it up in the context of other puppets
yes.
that we've made, and the Sioka doesn't see the need to smooth away the mark of the chisel or the adze that he's using to carve the figure, and that was a very useful hint when making puppets that have to move in light and hopefully alter their expression by making visible gouges in the wood. As the puppet turns, the theater lights flicker across the cracks and gouges of the face and animate it as the puppet moves. And that was a lesson from the skeleton.
And quite an early lesson from what I understand. So really important.
Yeah. So now we're getting to
yes.
the Daniels. I encountered Daniels for the first time at the National Museum and Art Gallery in Botswana. He went up to Botswana in the I'm not sure exactly what the dates were, 1799, 1800, around about there, and he made drawings of the Botswana people that were the first drawings ever made of them, but also they were the most advanced in a way drawings of African people, because they were often close-ups of faces, and these drawings have become, they're quite rare to find. We only have one original drawing, but and he made many, but what came out of this was a great book of aquatants, which were based on the drawings. And these aquatants were part of a book called African Scenery and Animals. I'm going to show this to you.
Got the actual book.
Well, it's a facsimile edition published. The original aquatants were published serially. You could subscribe to them, and as they got finished, because Daniel went back to England and worked on the plates back there.
Yes.
You could subscribe to them and buy them as they came out, and then at the end of that you could bind them in the book format like this. And so
this is a facsimile done in 1976 by Balkamer, but the original is one of the most sought after books in all of Afrikaner, and if you get come across one, you could expect to pay about R250,000 for it.
Wow.
So this is the new theatre in what was then called Hottentot Square, with Table Mountain in the background. This is one of the prints on the sale.
Yes.
But this is special for us because if you came out of the door of Handspring Studios, this theatre, which is now a church, is what you would see. This is exactly the view that we had from our first studio in Cape Town, which when we started Handspring in 1981. Then this is from Port Elizabeth, and it's something or area. That blockhouse is what was inspired our workshop and rehearsal room in Johannesburg. Nick Sack had designed it for us, and
you can actually move on to the next one because we've got some fantastic images of that actual building.
Yeah, so that's that was our first studio in Johannesburg, and the workshop and rehearsal room were based on the kind of blockhouse idea in African art. The line drawing, the right-hand side of the line drawing shows it best, and shows those little square windows on the extreme right-hand side. So Adrian,
what sort of led you to look at the blockhouse for inspiration? Did you have the Daniel's image first and then look to it for inspiration, or was it a more sort of organic process that just fell into place?
I think it was an organic process. It was something and I think Nick seen them in
Basil, I think you might have your hand for your speaker. There we go.
Okay, so this is one of the famous prints, aquatants by Daniel of the extinct quagga, one of the most beautiful. We also have this one, and another great image. So yeah, these are
Basil, I think you've covered your. There we go. We can no.
Okay. We're back.
Great. And you've also got some really, really lovely portrait works by Daniel's in this collection. These are two very, very sensitive portraits. Again, I know that you were introduced to Daniel very, very early on. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about these portraits? I know that they're quite important type of works to you.
Well, in an age of examination of the effects of colonialism on our part of the world here, one does sort of wonder, well, what was the world that was disrupted by this process when people simply took the land? And the expedition up to Botswana that Daniel made, he encountered all of the communities and the cultures that he met in their original form. Basically, what people were wearing, what they were eating, how they related to one another, and he recorded it visually. So the documents are incredibly valuable historically.
But I found that I made a work based on them, which is here. I don't know if you can see that.
Yes, we can, and we can also, to the right of our screen, we have got an image of that work as well. But I know it's far more complicated, that work that was influenced by Daniel's, than what you can see on our screen. So maybe you can just tell us a little bit about how that work actually works and what it was about.
It's part of a book, an artist book, Robin Silverberg and Kim Berman, called Emandulo. And Adrian will manipulate the pages so that you can see that's Deborah Bell. Various artists contributed to the book, and you can flip the pages.
Just Adam and Eve.
Oh, yeah. You can make different compositions by flipping the pages, and ours was mine was one of the drawings.
And what made you choose to look to Daniel's for inspiration in this particular artwork that you made?
I don't know. I love the combination of the words from Setswana, and both Setswana and English. And I guess I'm not sure why I chose them. I guess out of love for them.
Yeah, they're great works, and I think to the left, that the larger drawing on the far left is also an original watercolor that you own, from what I understand, by Daniel's. And then all the small images are actually works that are in the Joburg Art Collection. So really a well-recognized artist, and one that's really captured individuals as individuals in a time when I think individuals were mainly being portrayed as types. So,
if you look at those faces, you can see the real people behind them, and that was about 80 years ahead of any of the other colonial artists that came out here. You won't see that happen again. This was happening at the turn of the 1790s to 1804. You won't see that happening again until the late 19th century.
Sure. These are another two very historical works, not by Daniel's. These two are by Francois La Valiant. And here the giraffe is very interesting, because images of giraffes were, of course, an important inspiration for one of your productions, Tall Horse. And I know that Tall Horse has a fascinating story behind it. I was wondering if you could tell us just a little bit of that story, and maybe also how you developed that tall horse or giraffe puppet.
If you look at the dates of the giraffe, 1790s to 1796, at that period, Le Valiant he came to the Cape, obviously, but at that point, a giraffe had not been seen in Europe since the time of the Romans. It was a totally fabled creature. So we made a play about the gift of a giraffe to the King of France in the 18th by the Pasha of Egypt in the 1820s. It was an attempt by the Pasha of Egypt to prevent France from siding with the Greek liberation movement that was growing in Greece to pull away from the Ottoman Empire. The Pasha of Egypt was obviously one of the Ottomans, and he didn't want France to intervene. So he thought, what is the most precious thing that the King of France might be seduced by? And so he caught a giraffe in the Sudan, sent it down the Nile, and it walked from Marseille to Paris, creating an enormous stir as it went, because people couldn't believe that anything could have such a long neck. So that was the stick of a piece we did as a collaboration with a puppet company from Mali in West Africa, the Sogolon Marionette Troupe.
Yeah, we had always been talking about the Malian tradition in puppetry. It's a very, very strong tradition. And it was a great honor for us to be able to work with a real Malian puppet company on a story that has an African origin and a true story.
And we, in fact, our encounter with the Malian puppet traditions goes back to the time in Botswana when I went to Johannesburg on a buying trip. I saw a figure in Toto Menegeli's shop in Jeppe Street, and I thought that looks like a puppet to me. At this stage, Basil was not at all interested in the puppet theater, and I suppose I was trying to, well, maybe this might get him to change his mind. So I bought the figure, and it was posted to me in Botswana after all my 6 months of checks had been cashed by Toto Menegeli. And we unwrapped it, and this is the figure that we found.
And did it make him change his mind?
It made Basil change his mind.
Yeah, it's now definitely more than 50 years old, this puppet. And by chance, it was lost, and we found it this morning.
Oh wow!
In a cupboard in our house. It was it's the most important puppet in our collection, actually, because it is the puppet that Adrian used in a way to seduce me into becoming a puppeteer. So we are really celebrating this the arrival back into our lives of this very special puppet.
Well, I'm glad that it worked and that you did join the puppet making, because you've got a fantastic history now of puppet making. So thank you very much for that. But these works on the screen now are actually the last work that we're going to discuss in this collection this evening. And it's the work on the left, the portrait of a bearded man from 1947, that is a part of your collection. But we're very, very lucky on this sale to have another 3 watercolors, all from the same period by Pemba. So I've included those just on the left of the screen. You can see those 3 works. And all of these works were actually created between 1944 and 1947. And just from my side, I'd like to say that Pemba, I think, is a really, really fantastic artist for collectors to be looking at the moment. His works are doing so well in the market. Aspire had 9 oils on our last sale, the entire year sale in Johannesburg, and they all did really exceptionally well. He also is included in a show at the Norval Foundation at the moment, which is curated by Sean O'Toole. But these watercolors are very early and very rare works. In 1944, Pemba had actually secured a grant to tour across South Africa, and he was very interested to see how people lived, and he wanted to capture the sort of the spirit or the soul of people in their natural surroundings. So these works from the 40s become a fantastic visual archive of rural Xhosa life. But in your particular work, I really feel Pemba's captured this sitter again with a wonderful sensitivity that's evident in a lot of your works and in a lot of your portrait works. If I look at the Daniels, it's also evident there, and it's evident in the Maholi and in the Bonilla Bam work. So I was wondering, is this work, is Pemba's capacity to capture the essence of the individual something that drew you to the work, or what was it about this work that you enjoy?
I think it's that shine on the cheek, and the economy with which it's painted. There's a looseness to the brushwork in this painting that gives it its life, and the way he looks directly at you. I think that the gaze from the sitter is amazingly caught.
Yeah, I love the hair. That you just know that hair so well, and he's kind of marvelously in between thoughts, one feels, and I love that in betweenness of where he is as the sitter. It's an extremely again a brave thing to paint, and not all his work is like that. Sometimes his things look very traditional. This somehow isn't like that. It's the in-betweenness of where he is in his thoughts that I think is what sustains it as an image for me.
Okay, that brings us to the end of your selection of works, but I just wanted to ask you finally, I know really what I love about your collection is that you've selected really striking examples of each artist's, and they hold such important meaning in your lives. I was wondering if you've got any advice to new collectors, but also to seasoned collectors in terms of their collecting practices.
I think that I would say try to meet the artists and get to know them. Understanding the artist helps you to understand the work better. And as I've already said, look at the work. If you're thinking of, look. But if you're thinking of buying a work, then really looking carefully is important. Doing good research into the artist's career is also useful, and I think it's really important to always buy a work that's in good condition. Never buy a work that's in poor condition. And then a very simple thing: always framing any paperworks under museum glass. It's very expensive, but it's an investment. I think that with any art, if you're not really wealthy, you have to the choices of buying work. It's always between what you love and what you also feel is an investment. But you might be spending 10,000 Rand. That's a lot of money, or 50,000 Rand. It can't be just because you love it without any good reason. You must know that it's going to be, or likely to be, an investment. So keeping that investment under museum glass is important. Obviously, you would never put any work in the sun in your home. It's really important that you limit the amount of light that any work on paper receives. And normally, when you are starting out as a collector, you're buying works on paper, not oils because they tend to be too expensive. So, but I think getting to know the artist, either if the artist is dead or alive, but if it's an existing South African artist, then go and visit them, go and talk to them, and get to know them if you can, because that will help you immensely in terms of your decision on which works to buy.
Yeah, and explore the young artists as well.
Yes. Yeah. I think, I mean, that's really important advice, to know the artist. You can end up getting so much more value out of works. It gives such an additional kind of depth to the works, but also some really, really good practical advice, because especially if you're buying paper works, if you're not keeping them correctly and the condition is affected, you can't enjoy the work anymore, but also it has a huge impact on the value and possible investment value. So that's really important information that I think people don't always think about very carefully. But I can see we've already got on the screen here two of your recent or new and upcoming projects. So I just wanted to take this little opportunity that we have at the end of this talk to ask you a little bit about your own work, and for you to tell us what you've been busy with and what people may have to look forward to from Handspring possibly in the near future.
Yeah, the picture on the right, the walk, is of she's the prototype of a puppet that has just completed a 4-month trip across Europe, from Syria, border of Syria, to Manchester and beyond. And she's a Syrian refugee girl, and her simple story is that her mother went out one day in Aleppo in Syria to look for food. Her father had already been a victim of the struggle there. Her mother never came back, so she left home trying to find her mother and traveled right across Europe. So she was following the route that refugees take as they try to find a new home. And it's been a very amazing project in that she's developed a sort of almost a cult following as she's gone, with the news of her arrival accumulating more and more information as she's crossed through the many countries that she did.
And what the organizers were doing really is challenging people in every city and town that she visited to welcome her in some way, in their original way. And so children from all over Europe wrote her letters, sang to her when she arrived, made puppets to welcome her, dancers, street lights at night to light her way through a city. There were many different ideas of how to welcome her, but finding ways to be kind to people who are on the move is really what it was all about. And so I think tens of thousands of children across the whole of Europe are now aware of who she is and who refugees represent. And so it's been that wasn't anything that we did. That we simply made a puppet, and the Good Chance Theatre did all the organizing and the artistic direction of how she moved across Europe. But it's been an extraordinary success, which ended at COP26 when she brought with her a tree that had burnt when she was going through Turkey. There were big fires in Turkey, and one of those burnt trees she brought to COP26 and presented with the other children or young people that were also presenting at COP26.
Yeah, the Life and Times of Michael Kay is our current production with the Baxter Theatre, directed by Lara Foote and based on her adaptation of the novel of the same name by John Coetzee. And it has just had a postponed world premiere in Germany, in Düsseldorf. We had a brief season of it before COVID shut us down in the earlier part of this year, but it is coming back to the backs during February for a proper run.
Oh, fantastic. So there is something that those of us in Cape Town can look forward to.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah, me too. But we've now gone past 7 o'clock even. So I'm going to say thank you very, very much, Adrian and Basil, for joining us and wrap this evening's talk up. And for those of you who want to see all of these fabulous works that we've been talking about, they are actually all on display at Aspire's new Johannesburg premises, 32 Bolton Road, Parkwood. And they'll be on show every day from now until the 30th of November, when the auction will be held. It's a live auction at 6 p.m. You can go to the auction live, or you can, through our website, log in and bid. And yes, just thank you to everyone for joining us, and especially to Basil and Adrian. I've enjoyed your insights, and it's been really, really interesting. I'm sure that all of our guests have enjoyed it too. So thank you very much, and good night.
Thank you, Sarah. It's been a pleasure.
Bye. Thank you.